Coming to you live via recording from Appleton, Wisconsin, it's time for your conservative smackdown. In this corner, your pugilistic pundit, the Duke of Diplomacy, the Professor of Patriotism, the Doctor of Domestic Tranquility.
This is Right Makes Might with Dr. Duke.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Right Makes Might. I'm Dr. Duke, the aforesaid pugilistic pundit. I'm here with Sparky, my cornerman, and today we have an exciting show. We're going to talk to you about a topic that's dear to my heart, very multicultural. The title of our episode is Jobs Islamists Won't Do. Swedes erasing their own Christian symbols. My goodness, have we reached the point in Western culture where Christians are busy removing Christian symbols from Christian churches so as not to be offensive? Is that where we've gotten to? Have we had a situation where Islamic fundamentalists are too busy shooting kids in the back, taking over cities in the Middle East to actually engage in acts of iconoclasm against Christian churches? Well, here we go. Round one. I'd like to introduce you to great moments in Swedish church history. Let's go back to the period of 993 to 1024 AD when the Swedish king Olaf converted to Christianity, was converted by Saint Sigfrid, and introduced the faith to his people. He was martyred by rebels after he refused to sacrifice to pagan idols. And then there is Saint Eskil, who was martyred in 1069. He was a missionary bishop sent to bring Christian love and understanding to Swedes everywhere. He was martyred by stoning at the hands of pagans. And then there was Saint Eric IX, king of Sweden from 1150 to 1160. He provided Swedes of all denominations, Christian and not, fair laws, just courts. He introduced measures to assist the poor and the infirm, and for that he was martyred by pagans as he was leaving church one day. And now we leap from those great medieval Christian saints to modern-day Christian Sweden, where we encounter Bishop Eva Brunne. She is a bishop of the Lutheran Church of Sweden, the largest denomination of Swedish Christians. She is also, besides being a female bishop, she is also the first openly lesbian bishop to serve in any mainline church anywhere in the Christian world. And she's also married. Her wife is fellow priest Gunilla Linden, also of the Lutheran Church of Sweden. And you can see the picture there. And this is really remarkable, Sparky. You have a lesbian bishop and a lesbian priest ministering at the same rite, the Lutheran Church. I suppose they could theoretically have, served as the pastor for each other's wedding. So think about that. That's a potential double registry at IKEA. Imagine how much cheap wooden furniture they could have gotten for that if they had that kind of foresight. That's what we're always thinking ahead for here. But most alarming about Bishop Eva Brunne is in October of this year, 2015, she asked a church in Malmo, a seaport town, to create a Muslim prayer room inside the church, and to make sure that Muslim prayer room was oriented towards Mecca. As if that was not enough, she also instructed the church to remove all Christian symbols, crosses, to avoid offending Muslims who come to the Christian church to pray. And if that's not enough, Brunne argues that such a move will make the church much less offensive for tens of thousands of Muslims entering Sweden from the Middle East and North Africa as refugees. This is absolutely astounding if you stop to think about it, that we expect now Christian churches have to accommodate Muslim refugees. It's one thing for Christians in the spirit of charity to accommodate and to welcome, to try to provide succor and support, maybe some food and warm blankets for Muslim refugees. But now we're going to take space in Christian churches. We're going to make it unchristian. We're going to engage in acts of iconoclasm. We're going to rip Christian symbols down from these rooms in our Christian churches that will now be oriented to Mecca in order to accommodate refugees fleeing from Islamic violence in their home countries, running to Christian Sweden. We're going to accommodate them by engaging in our own acts of iconoclasm. The idea that this is going to make Swedish Muslims comfortable, that it's going to make them somehow more sympathetic to Christianity? Do we not pay any attention to what's going on around the world? Let's go back to Afghanistan a few years back, when Islamic rebels, Islamic fighters in Afghanistan could not tolerate the fact that 2,000-year-old beautiful works of art from Buddhist culture predated the rise of Islam in Afghanistan. And so what did those Taliban fighters do to these wonderfully priceless works of art that represent another culture's religious tradition? Well, you guessed it, they blew them up. Go jump forward also to this very year, 2015, where we see ISIS fighters in Iraq destroying historical Muslim treasures, pre-Muslim treasures, from Iraqi history going all the way back to the Bronze Age. Here we have another image, right, of ISIS warriors chiseling out Christian crosses from churches in Iraq. And I guess I'm going to ask this question. What is the difference between what this fellow with the sledgehammer is doing, taking down the cross from Christian churches in Iraq, because that's offensive to Muslims, right? The wonderfully multicultural religion of Islam is terribly, terribly unwelcoming of Christian churches. So there they are, chiseling out crosses from Christian churches in Iraq, which is exactly what Bishop Brunne is doing in Sweden. And now you have a situation here where Muslims destroy and urinate on the Virgin Mary statue in Italy. So now you have Italy, the seat of Roman Catholicism, not just Lutherans in Sweden. Now you have the seat of Roman Catholicism, Italy, where Muslims in various communities are pulling down statues of the Virgin Mary and urinating on them. You know what, Spark? You remember that picture? A couple years ago, that artist who created an image of the Virgin Mary and smeared it with elephant dung that hung in a New York museum? I mean, that picture we just showed you of the broken statue of the Virgin Mary being urinated on. Maybe we ought to get those enterprising Islamists from Italy to send that to a New York museum and see if they can't get a NEH grant from the federal government of America. I bet we would. Given that we're willing to tolerate and promote the Virgin Mary smeared with elephant dung in our country, maybe those guys can get a big fat American NEH grant to continue their depredations. What do you think? And then we have, as we return to the sad situation that is Sweden, we have the case of Imam Abu Rab of northern Sweden, a prominent and influential figure in the Swedish Imam Association. And Imam Rab has received over 400,000 kroner from the Swedish government in order to, get this, combat Islamophobia and racism in Swedish society. Now, for those of you who are a little bit concerned about the kroner conversion rate, I get that it's confusing. In fact, there is another great mind in our recent history who struggled with kroner conversion.
Well, let's see. I've got a 10 kroner, a 5 kroner, a 20 kroner. No, wait. That's another 10 kroner. Empty kroner. How much is that?
Now, don't be anxious. We did the math, took a little while, but Imam Rab received the equivalent of 47,000 American dollars in Swedish taxpayer kroner to launch an anti-Islamic racism campaign, to fight and combat Islamophobia in Sweden. This is the same imam, this is the same Muslim priest who has made the following defamatory statements in his church. He has urged Swedish Muslims to follow the following maxims from his pulpit. One, that homosexuality in Sweden is punishable by death. That you should not, as a Muslim in Sweden, befriend non-believers or like them. And I don't think he's talking about Facebook. Do not join communities of non-believers. Adopt their nationalities, join their armies. And finally, do not imitate the clothing of the infidel, their appearance, their speech, etc., because to do so indicates a love for the person or the people imitated. So let me see if I understand this. You have a Swedish bishop who is basically taking out Christian symbols to make Christian churches more welcoming to Muslims who clearly, judging from Imam Rab, have no use for Christian symbols. We just saw how they blow up, they destroy, they take down any images of Christian art in their own cultures. Now you're inviting them to Sweden to do the same thing.
Do you have a question or comment you'd like Dr. Duke to respond to? Email the show at media@fpeusa.org.
And now it's time for our knockout round. What did we learn in the ring today? Well, we learned about Sweden's Muslim immigration problem. We learned about how refugees from Muslim countries are flooding into countries like Sweden. We also learned about how the bishop of the Lutheran Church of Sweden, the largest Christian church in all of Sweden, Bishop Eva Brunne, how she has created a safe space, a sanctuary, so to speak, in Christian churches. What she's done is she's required one of her churches in Malmo, a seaport town, to have a separate room for Muslims to come in and pray, Muslim refugees. That room will be a safe space. It will be oriented towards Mecca in the middle of a Christian church. And she has ordered that all Christian symbols be taken down, all crosses be removed from the room, any vestiges of Christian iconography are taken out of the room so that Muslim refugees can use a Christian church to pray to a non-Christian God. And what's most problematic about this is that Bishop Brunne is actually a lesbian. In a mark of Christian tolerance, the Swedish Lutheran Church ordained her as a lesbian. She's also married, Eva Brunne, to her female partner who happens to be a priest in the very same denomination, Lutheran denomination, that Bishop Brunne is. And of course, this is progressive Christianity. This is the idea that we're going to show the world how progressive and tolerant we are. We're going to ordain gay women. We're going to let those gay women be married to other gay women who are also priests in our church. The problem with all of this for Bishop Brunne is, what is happening to homosexuals in the countries from which these refugees are fleeing? In places all across the Middle East, homosexuals, men and women, are being stoned, hanged in public squares in places like Iran, simply for the sin of being homosexual. Now we've got homosexual Bishop Eva Brunne, who is eradicating the symbols of tolerance that put her in her position in the first place, in order to accommodate Muslims who are fleeing from things like anti-homosexual bigotry in their home countries, running to places like Sweden. A lesbian bishop now is eradicating the iconography of the religion that gave them that freedom. This kind of hypocrisy is much more about accommodation, much more about surrender than it is outreach. What kind of a Christianity is this that's embarrassed to do its good works in the name of Christ? That, I think, is a huge problem. The fact that you have a lesbian bishop married to her female priest lesbian partner, using now the power of the pulpit, the power of the church, to basically whitewash, sanitize Christianity out of rooms in a church that are designated for Muslim prayer. We've also seen how Muslim iconoclasts are busily erasing all symbols of all other cultures from the lands they have conquered, whether it's the Buddhas in Afghanistan or the artwork in the pre-civilizational artwork in places like Iran, the museums where they're destroying it, or even in Italy, where refugee Muslims are destroying statues of the Virgin Mary and urinating on them. There is no tolerance in those cultures for other iconographical displays. And yet we have a Christian bishop now really ready to eradicate Christian symbology in order to appease and placate Muslim refugees. Well, this is a big problem. So taking our journalistic responsibilities here at Right Makes Might seriously, we scoured the world for foremost Swedish authorities. We think we came up with the #1 representative of modern Sweden. This person, when you think of modern Sweden today, this is your go-to person. This person seems to represent what's happened to Swedish culture over the last 40 or 50 years of socialist control. So we brought him in and we asked him a very poignant question. Sir, how do you feel about what's going on in Swedish Christian churches to this day? De what de hay indeed, Swedish chef. De what de hay. Well, we know from our Gospels, don't we, that Christ says, if you deny me before men, I will deny you before the Father in heaven. What we have going on in Swedish churches now is an absolute denial of Christ in the name of a kind of squishy, postmodern liberal conception of Christianity that is actually embarrassed about the name of Jesus. In that regard, Bishop Eva Brunne is no different than the Muslim iconoclasts who seek to strip Christianity and Christian symbols off of Christian churches and eradicate them from the record. In that sense, she's a lot like that other Eva Brunne, who in Germany participated with Hitler in the absolute removal of Jewish symbols from all across the country in the name of embarrassment and social engineering and ultimately of the final solution. What happens when Christians in the West are more embarrassed about their Christianity than they are willing to stand up and defend the name of Christ? We have a big problem. Christ also in the Gospels famously let us know that he expected his followers to be wise as serpents but as innocent as doves. Christians had to be both innocent and holy, but also very aware of how the world worked and what kind of forces there were that sought to swallow Christianity up. Well, modern Christianity, particularly in places like Sweden, but coming to an American denomination near you, no doubt, we have decided that Christianity means being innocent as doves. And when we are innocent as doves as Christians, but not wise as serpents, then inevitably refugee serpents are going to gobble up us doves. And that's the situation as we find it today in the modern world, and it's a sad commentary on modern Christianity. That's the knockout round.
Don't miss a second of Dr. Duke. Visit FreedomProject.com and sign up for our free newsletter. Like us on Facebook or follow us in the Twitterverse. All the links can be found at FreedomProject.com.